Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another virtual San Diego Comic-Con 2020 panel. This is one myself and Mr. Baizley have been looking forward to a great deal. It's our Horizon Zero Dawn Comics panel. Let me introduce the panel for you. We're privileged to be joined today by Ben McCaw. Ben is the narrative director at Guerrilla Games in Amsterdam. He's originally from McLean, Virginia in the USA. He received his undergraduate degree in film from Brown University and an MFA in screenwriting from the Columbia University School of the Arts. Prior to Guerrilla, he worked as a freelance writer for Ubisoft and WB Games. And we have with us Jan-Bart van Beek. He is the studio art director at Guerrilla, and as the studio art director, JB oversees the arts and animation quality of all Guerrilla projects. He was a photography student at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in The Hague. JB then turned to computer graphic software to enhance his work. After graduation, he applied his knowledge as a CG artist in the field of advertising. His ambition to create something more enduring led him to join Guerrilla, where he quickly became the lead artist on Killzone and the art director on Killzone 2 and beyond. Gilbert Sanders is with us. Gilbert Sanders is principal artist and he's part of the art direction team of the comic book project and leading the vegetation art team on Horizon projects. As well as an avid comic book fan, he's been working on Horizon from the very beginning together with JB. Anne Toole is with us. Anne Toole is a Writers Guild nominee who provides narrative design, story and character development, and dialogue for games across all platforms. She most recently acted as lead writer on the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC for Assassin's Creed Origins, and Anne won a Writers Guild Award for her work on Horizon Zero Dawn. She also created the 100-episode series Als Liebe Annette, if I've pronounced that correctly, and wrote for the Emmy-winning web series, The Lizzie Bennet Diaries. We're very pleased to have Ann Maulina with us. Ann Maulina is an Indonesian game, comic, and concept artist with a bachelor's degree in visual communication design. And Anne is the author of the web comic, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Raururian. And last but not least, we have Mr. Duncan Baizley. Duncan Baizley is one of the most accomplished entertainment journalists in the UK. He was the managing editor of the UK's best-selling and most influential men's lifestyle magazine. He was the managing editor of Time Incorporated's biggest ever magazine launch. And we now are privileged to have him as our editorial director. Duncan's first gig was as a video game journalist. So he specifically asked for this assignment today, and therefore he has it. So everybody, I'd like to ask the opening question, and if you could go through this in turn for me, that would be awesome. It's specifically, could you break down your role and your involvement in this project? We'll start with you, JB, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, thank you. So yeah, I'm Jan-Bart van Beek. I'm one of the 3 studio directors here at Guerrilla, together with Michiel and Angie. I've been involved from Horizon from the very beginning. Originally, 10 years ago, when we started pitching for new projects, this was my idea that I pitched forward, and I was very happy that it was brought forward and it developed into the game that we're making at the moment and the franchise that we're making at the moment. Along that, we always wanted to do comics. We explored it a little bit in the time that we were doing Killzone. And then when we got to Horizon, we really wanted to pick that up and do something quite special with it. And that's sort of how we started thinking about this already years ago. Wouldn't this be cool to make a comic book series out of it as well? And Gilbert and me both are big comic book fans. Literally, our houses are filled from bottom to floor, with cupboards full of comic books. So it was really very exciting to start working on one ourselves.
Excellent. You're a person after our own heart. How about yourself, Anne T? How did you get into all of this?
Well, I certainly started working on the first game. They definitely needed some writers towards the end of production, and I was able to come and work on site, which was a great experience working with a bunch of really great writers. I'm totally buttering Ben up. And it was really great. And I actually did work on the Hunter's Lodge quest line, which included the Talanah storyline. So when it came time to work on the comic book, I was definitely considered. And I had also worked on another comic book based on a video game franchise. So I think those two experiences gelled together, and I was able to work on the comic, which I was really excited about because I really like working in different media, but with the same IP. So this is obviously very exciting for me.
Fantastic, thank you. It's very exciting for all of us. Ben, can you break down your involvement in the project?
Sure. I joined Guerrilla just as the serious effort was getting underway to develop the story for Horizon Zero Dawn. So, you know, a lot of development had sprouted from JB's idea, a lot of art, a lot of design, but there really wasn't a story yet. So working with John Gonzalez, we developed the core story for Horizon Zero Dawn, and you know, my role at Guerrilla has evolved from there. We knew pretty early on we wanted to try to do a comic, especially as the game and the franchise kind of have taken off a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's always been my ambition to work in comics. I was an avid comic book guy especially when I was younger. So I think Anne already kind of hit on it a little bit, like especially once we knew that Talanah was going to be a central character in it. Anne just seemed like a natural choice because she had worked on Zero Dawn already.
Fantastic, thank you. That's what we love working with. People who love comic books. Ann Maulina, how did you get involved with this project, and what's your role, Anne?
Hi, I'm really nervous actually. I'm really thrilled to be a part of this project. My role involvement in the project is mainly as sequential artist, and I do comic layouts and inks for interior pages, and I also do some illustration for the comic covers. I think that's pretty much my involvement in this project.
Fantastic. Could I just say, Anne, that one of the great thrills of our working life is that we of course get to see all the artwork as it comes in, and get that vast thrill of looking at your artwork when it hits our desks, don't we, Mr. Baizley?
We do.
It's supremely exciting. Your artwork is fantastic, and we work with a handful of great artists. We work with a bunch of really good artists. We work with a handful of great artists, and you're one of them. Your work's exceptional, and it's one of the great highlights of our month to see the pages come through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gilbert, what about yourself?
Hi. Well, for me, I've been an artist at Guerrilla Games since Killzone days, and when the Horizon project started prototyping, so that's 2011 or so. I joined JB into the early prototypes and fleshing out the world of Horizon. Right now, I'm doing all the vegetation for the game with not on my own, but with my team. And when the comic started taking shape, JB asked me to assist him in art directing this line of books because, well, we are all pretty busy in Amsterdam. So we're spreading the joy of art directing this comic.
Fantastic. And I have to say that I'm locked down and quarantined in London with my son. He's a young adult, and he is a huge fan of this entire property, and is very envious about the fact that I'm actually on this call here right now, and that the visual world you guys have created is just exceptional. So, Mr. Baizley, do you want to get into some questions? Do you have the questions?
I do indeed. Yeah. So yeah, this first one is really for the Guerrilla team, Gilbert, Ben, and JB. Now, this is the first time that you've actually met Ann Maulina, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So far, only just had the pleasure of seeing her artwork.
So
well, I connected to her on Twitter, so I'm keeping a close eye on her.
Okay.
Yeah. That's how
So-
we interact with a lot of our international artists ourselves.
So JB then, so what drew you to Ann Maulina's art style in the first place?
So right after the first game came out, Gilbert was looking at a couple of forums, and people there, basically, were some fans were sort of projecting, who could make a comic book for this, basically, who would have a very fitting style, and so Gilbert was showing me this thread, and basically a whole bunch of artists got mentioned, a whole bunch of writers got mentioned, and then basically Anne's work was among that, and basically it was some of the work that she has done for Ruarin. And basically we looked it up, and we looked a little bit further in it, and we felt basically that this really matched basically what we wanted to do. Basically there was a vibrancy basically to the color palettes that she had that really fitted it. Basically the sort of more aquarelle basically painted aspect basically had a very naturalistic feel basically that we felt basically worked well with the comic, and we really felt basically that she could do an absolutely brilliant job on getting basically Horizon onto the pages as a comic book. So we were kind of lucky basically that other people, basically our own fans, has spotted this and basically came up with this brilliant suggestion to bring her on board.
So fantastic. So it was the community that kind of got you together in the first place.
Yeah, indeed. I don't know, Gilbert, maybe you remember a little bit more about the details?
Well, no, not where we found her exactly, but we were. I'm always on the lookout for comic news. That's my. I have a daily commute, and that's my little go-to. And so when the game came out, I was looking through comic-related news, and I just picked up on a thread where a lot of people were discussing how this could work, and that there should be a comic, and that if there was one, who would be involved. And the artwork popped up, and I think at some point we were in a pub somewhere, JB and we were discussing this, and I remembered it. So I showed it to JB, and he had the same opinion. So that's kind of how the ball started rolling.
Yeah. So Anne, when Titan first contacted you and presented this project, how was that? How did that feel?
It was quite a shock, of course, because as far as I know, I'm not a famous artist, and my work in comic career, I can count on them like with my fingers. It's not that many. So I was wondering, how did Titan found me? And then I got the answer just now. But of course, I was thrilled to work on this project, because who would not? Horizon Zero Dawn is our favorite game, and it is a dream come true to be involved in this IP.
Yeah, it's great that there are so many people who are working on this project who are just fans of Horizon Zero Dawn. They're just massive fans of the game, and that's what's made this such a joyous kind of project, if you like. It's been great fun to do, just because everyone just loves the game. So
as Mr. Baizley will agree, actually, everywhere we go, this is the project that everybody wants to talk about all the time. This is the superstar project for this year. Everybody just loves it.
Yeah. So I was just going to follow that up by Ben just saying, could you share with us how you'd worked with Anne T previously and how she came to work on the project?
Sure, absolutely. So, most of Horizon Zero Dawn was written by a small core of writers in Amsterdam. But as the project developed, we knew we needed some help. And Anne had already amassed a very impressive CV in the games industry. And when we turned to her, we invited her out. We kind of took her through what we were doing. And we really wanted to give her this pretty big slice of content that was about the Hunter's Lodge and about Talanah. And we had an outline for it, but I think Anne really brought a much better perspective to it, and a much better perspective to kind of honoring this character and what she wanted and what she kind of needed throughout the story. So that was, I think, a process of, I'm just guessing here because I can't quite remember, but I think maybe a process of doing 5 or 6 quests for Horizon Zero Dawn. And then we had her do some more because she was doing such a good job. So naturally, then when we decided that the comic book should focus on Talanah, she was like the #1 person on her list. But that said, she also had something else going for her, which is that I had read her work for a Halo comic book, and it was really good, and it had a lot of the characteristics we wanted from this book. So it was a strong female protagonist. It was a kind of adventure story where the hero is kind of on their own for a good chunk of it and having to navigate an unfamiliar environment. And it just had some cool action sequences. So it really fit what we were doing. So it was kind of like a double proof that we kind of had what we needed with Anne. So we brought her back out and started hashing out the story for the book.
So Anne T, what was that like? You're working with Guerrilla on the game, and then all of a sudden, you're back in the comic world. How did that feel?
It was a really great experience because certainly with the comics that I've worked on, it's usually just the writer, and then, you know, everyone else is very distributed. And so it was really exciting to work on site again, to be back with the old gang under weird artwork in the ceiling. And also just having like a mini writer's room to come up with the storyline, which I have done in games and in animation and in other media, but I'd never done in comics. And I really also enjoyed the fact that like everything is canon, which is totally my jam, is when it's the continuation of the same story and everything is exactly what happened. So that was really exciting. And it was, the greatest part about working on Horizon, regardless of the medium, is working with a bunch of other great writers. Because so often, especially in games, I'm the only one. So I really enjoyed it.
I should clarify that what Anne just said, though, we were actually working in a 16th century row house on a canal in Amsterdam. It was sort of an expansion of the main Guerrilla office, and it did in fact have a massive mural of angels and cherubs above us as we we worked on the project.
Fantastic.
So that's what she was referring to there.
Guiding your
Brilliant.
hands.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of culture shock because, like, you know, I've lived in Europe, but I had literally just come from LA, so I was like, whoa, I am really in Europe.
So Anne T, you're working with Ann Maulina, and this is the first time you guys have met as well. What's that been like? How's that relationship how's that been?
Yeah, well, we don't talk directly except through the script and the artwork, but it's you know, like they were saying, it's just amazing to see the artwork and being like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. You just can't handle how good it looks. And they were showing on the screen a couple of spreads from, I guess, issue 0, and I'm still looking at it like, oh my God, it looks so good. So it's really exciting to meet her.
And so Anne, how's that been? How have you found the collaborative part of this experience working with Anne?
Actually, I had some difficulty at first. So when not with Anne Toole specifically, but working on this project, actually I got this layered feedback from the production, from the writer, and from the IP holder. It's like it came one by one, and it makes me confused. So, but I think we have a nice workflow now. Well, yeah, I got help from the editors, Martin Tolle and Duncan, by compiling the feedback before coming to me. And then also, Anne Toole, I really love when you insert images, image reference on the script. It really helped me picturing how the characters position on the scene. So thank you so much. It's really I really enjoy working with you.
Hey, on that note, one of the things that's been really interesting about the comic book is how complex some of the action sequences have been. And I would compare this in some ways to game development. So one of the things we've been doing is that like we basically plot out these action sequences from a top down, almost like isometric perspective, just to make sure everything works. And then we make sure Anne Toole is on board with that. And then we've actually, she and we have included diagrams and things like that, maps and things like that into the art feedback. So yeah, it's sometimes it can be very complex.
Yeah, it's very helpful, the diagram.
Yeah, we get some great comprehensive feedback from you guys. And actually, Ben just touched on something I was going to ask JB. When you think about the game development, is that what sort of lent you to explore the Horizon Zero Dawn universe in a comic format? Could you just kind of see it in your head as a comic?
Not necessarily at first, but of course, Becky, it's a very character-driven game. Becky, a large part of the experience is Aloy's story, and although, of course, there's gameplay and there's combat, there's also, Becky, this very personal, very emotional story, Becky, that we tell about Aloy. And we felt, Becky, that we had built, Becky, this very rich universe with a lot of different characters and a lot of exciting places to explore, and that, Becky, that we could take that further into the realm of comic books and, Becky, really sort of enrich the rest of the world and explore these other characters that we have built.
Great. And talking to characters, Ben, what kind of drove you towards Talanah as the lead character in this series?
Yeah, I mean, we gave this a lot of thought, obviously, and you know, some of the factors were as follows. One, we wanted to make sure it was a character that was involved in a lot of action. You know, I mean, in Talanah as the leader of the Hunter's Lodge and as a hunter, we knew we were going to be able to get her out into the wilds and have some really cool sequences with machines. On top of that, you know, she's just a character that seemed like a really cool action hero that we only told a little bit of her story. And we really wanted to kind of zero in on her some more and just sort of find out what was going to happen to her after she had sort of achieved some of the things she did in the game. Another big thing was that we wanted to focus on the tribal world. You know, a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn is about investigating the ancient past, but there's just this huge, vibrant part of the game that's about the tribes. And we really felt like that's where the comic book needed to be in terms of the characters and also visually, I think. So those are sort of some of the reasons. And then one more big one is that we really wanted to have another awesome female protagonist. That was important to us. It was a big aspect of the game, but also we felt like, you know, as in our first foray into comics, that was also something we should focus on.
Yeah. So and so a question for you, Anne T. Talking of awesome female protagonists, are there going to be any supporting characters that fans will recognise in this comic series?
There are a couple that there are a couple that players will recognize in the issue 0, the free comic book day comic. But the main story arc, there's a lot of new characters and new adventures for Talanah.
So I do want to point out that Aloy is still a prominent part of it too, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And just following on from that, so you were saying about new characters. Can you kind of expand on who we're going to see?
Well, in the 4-issue arc, she goes off outside Meridian and she encounters a man in the woods, so to speak, who they end up teaming up to track a machine. And he definitely features prominently throughout the 4 issues as they get to know each other a lot better.
Okay, so I guess a big question that I know that the fan community are kind of talking about is, when does the comic take place? And this is probably one for you, Ben. Is it after the events of the game?
Yes, and immediately after the event of the game. So almost literally, from the last shot of the video game, moving into what happens to Talanah right after.
Do you think that readers of the comic, do you think they need to have played Horizon Zero Dawn to get something out of this?
Absolutely not. We've really made a huge effort to make sure that this is a story that stands on its own, first and foremost. So, this is a story where, Talanah is the protagonist and Aloy has a strong role, but that you're going to get to sort of follow and understand her story without the game. We've also included a lot of ancillary material in the comic book just to get people up to speed on any of the sort of conceptual stuff. So, the big question of Horizon, like, why are these crazy machines out there in the wild? So those types of things, there'll be just a little bit of help in the comic book to get you on your way, and then the story just speaks for itself.
So we've got Free Comic Book Day, which is a little way in the future. So that will be issue 0, if you like, of this series. So a question for you, Auntie. How does that tie in with between the end of the game and what we see in the opening of the first comic in the series?
It definitely is what Ben said, is it's issue 0 is literally just last shot of the game, and it carries us through the first, I guess, few weeks after the end of the game for Talanah. And it definitely sets up the story arc of the first 4 issues about why Talanah, what launches Talanah to go on this adventure. Okay,
and going through that issue 0 into issue 1, and again, probably a question for you, Ben, there are some new elements introduced in the comic. Can you reveal a little bit about what those might be?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we might be looking at one right now. There's definitely a new machine. Actually, there's a couple of new machines that are not in Horizon Zero Dawn that will be featured in the comic book. And I think there's going to be some cool surprises there for readers that are familiar with the game. But, the great thing about our machines is that they're kind of awesome no matter what. So if you haven't played the game and you get to see these machines, I think you're going to be pretty excited. And then also there are new locations and characters. So we're going to start in one very, very familiar location, and then we're going to move to places in the Karja Sundom that people haven't seen before.
So on the back of what Ben's just said, I had this question for you, Anne. What was it like bringing those machines that no one had seen before? And I know that we tried to get in-game reference for them, but these, drawing a whole new kind of machine, what was that like?
I wasn't sure how to do it at first. I mean there are no in-game references like what you said. But then I remember the machines on Horizon Zero Dawn are based on existing creature in our world. So, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, Strider are based on horses, and then grazers are based on deers, and this Close Rider are based on Velociraptor. So to bring it to life on the comic book with a reference, I just used Velociraptor on the layouting pass, and then when the layout are approved, then I put the Close Rider design on top of it. Actually, that's pretty much how I work on other machines too.
And they look absolutely fantastic as well. Question for JB and Ben and Gilbert. Are there any other stories or characters you'd be interested in exploring in this comic format?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think if you think about the major characters in Horizon Zero Dawn, at one point or another, we've discussed all of them showing up in a comic book. So definitely talked about Aaron, we talked about Varl, we talked about Silence, we talked about Rost. So I would expect some or all of them to show up at some point.
And another question for you, Anne. Talking about the variety of the machines. Which is your favorite?
It's hard to just pick one. There's a lot of beautiful machine design on the game. Visually, I like Tallneck. It's really beautiful. And if it's something about what I want to draw, I think I'm interested with Fireclaw from the frozen wild. I really enjoy hunting this kind of machine on the game, and I think it will be really interesting to bring it on comic books, I think.
And I know we were talking about locations as well. So for Anne T and Ben, I mean, obviously there's a huge focus in the game on nature. It's very prominent there. Did that influence the locations that you chose for the comic so that it was a very visual thing?
Well, beyond, I would let, of course, JB and Gilbert talk about visual stuff, but for us, you know, beyond just nature as we think of it in terms of trees and forests and rivers, we were also thinking about a different kind of ecology, which is that of the machines. And that really came up a lot when we were trying to develop this story in particular, because it's very much a in-depth look at kind of what it's like to hunt a new machine. And we really tried to really think about how the machines interact with the environment and what we needed out of the environment to tell that story.
Okay, and quick question for you, JB. Were there any particular comics that you had in mind? Any other titles that you thought, that's how I want Horizon Zero Dawn to be? That's what I want it to look like?
No, not particularly. Of course, we had seen Ann Maulina's work itself, and that had this aspect of vibrancy and also a very lush world. She's developed her own tribes within, and it's always a difficult word to say, Raruian. And maybe that's what we wanted here as well, to really bring color and life to the tribes that we have. And of course, there's more to our game, than just the tribes. We have the natural world there and the ruins. In that regard, there isn't necessarily a comic book series that sort of touches these same tones, just like there isn't really a video game or a movie that really touches the same tones as Horizon. So for us, it's all breaking new ground and trying to figure out what our own look is when it comes to comic books, how we can make Horizon stand apart from everything else that's out there. Now, if I'm going to my personal favorites, on comic books in general, I think my all-time favorite are still my original series, Akira's from the 1990s. That is by far my favorite comic book series of all time. And maybe one day, if we ever go back to Killzone, that would be a brilliant style to work on there. But I think for Horizon, we just need to develop our own style there.
Yeah, Akira's definitely in my top 5. I'll tell you that.
Completely agree. Fantastic book.
Oh yeah, fantastic book. And interesting, we're still talking about the natural world. And so, will the comic feature a balance between the new natural order and the old technological order, or will it focus on one over the other?
Yeah, I mean, so a massive part of what Horizon is about how these three things interact: the tribes, the machines, and the natural world. And that's very much the case about this comic book. I think it goes into at least as much detail about that as we do at various times in Horizon Zero Dawn, the game. But we also wanted to make sure that was wrapped into a very personal story. So that, and again, this sort of goes back to an earlier question. This is why Talanah was just perfect for this, right? Because who better to to sort of be the lens for that than a tribal hunter and someone who's an expert at that and someone who's been out there in the wilds and has seen it all in a kind of sense and is now seeing something new.
Quick question for Anne Toole. Does writing for comic books present a different challenge from writing for video games?
Yeah, definitely. Each medium that I work in has different benefits and challenges as well. One of the challenges with comics is you can't just arbitrarily start adding pages, be like, I need 2 more pages. Well, you can't just add them. You have to go back and you have to find places to cut. And then, of course, there's always the concern about where the page breaks go and making sure you have a good page composition, which definitely forces you to lean a little bit more on your visual storytelling than in a game where you have obviously a team of people who can be like, hey, we can make it do this, we can make it do that. But it's also really liberating in a lot of different ways. I'm working on this animated show that's CG, and we can't do costume changes. There's a limit of how many props you can have. While with a comic, it's just whatever Anne is willing to draw. So that it's really just fresh ground to really explore Talanah and different expressions, different poses. You can just go to town. So it's really exciting in that regard.
So did you have a particularly favorite part of the story to write? Did you have a particular scene or character that you really got a kick out of doing?
Well, certainly, obviously, Talanah and getting to have sort of like, a lot of moments where it's through expressions or through like, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do. And that's the nice thing about comics is you can just hold on that moment, while anything that's animated, obviously it sails right by. So if you miss it, you miss it. So there's definitely a lot of moments like that.
So if you could give an idea for, what the fans should be looking forward to from this series, what would it be?
Well, certainly, as Ben was saying, is the new machines. It's really exciting. And then getting to know Talanah a little bit more and seeing her develop a new friendship with somebody and getting her really out of her comfort zone, even though it is about her going on a hunt. It's also about exploring different aspects of herself that she really hasn't addressed yet in her life.
Question for Anne M. You said how excited you were when Titan asked you to work on this project, and Guerrilla had wanted you to work on this project. So what's most exciting for you as we go through and as we work through this series? What's really exciting you?
What excites me the most is to bring a powerful female character in this comic. I love Aloy in the game, and I cannot not love Talanah. I love her character so much. Every time I face a new page to ink, I always want to draw her first. if you saw my comic Rarurian, it's what I always looking forward to, like bringing a powerful female character in the comic.
Great, and I know we're going to see some new machines, and you said how exciting it was to actually work on those. Are there any machines that we haven't seen that you haven't drawn at the moment that you'd love to have a go at?
I'm sorry.
Are there any new machines? Are there any of the machines that you haven't yet managed to draw that you'd love to have a go at?
Like what I said. I love to draw fire claws.
That's also one of my favorites.
Can I ask a few questions? Now that we're doing this for San Diego Comic-Con, and one of the great things about San Diego Comic-Con is that it's a non-profit, and its mission statement is it's dedicated to creating the general public's awareness of and appreciation for comics and comics-related popular art forms. So there are a couple of things that we always get asked to discuss with the attendees of our panels. And before I ask some of those questions, Ben, is there anything else that you feel that we haven't pulled out of Horizon Zero Dawn and out of the comics project that you'd like to mention before I get into those?
I just wanted to amplify maybe just very slightly on what Anne said, because I do think that getting to see, sorry, to what Anne Toole said, since we have two Anns here, is to just sort of amplify what she said about Talanah, which is like, she's a great character. We get to know a lot more about her, about how she ticks, and introduces a new relationship for her that you might call it a love story, depending on how you look at it, that really I think has a strong personal and emotional pull to it. So yeah, it's a story about machines, it's a story about hunting, it's a story about the world of Horizon, but it's also a story about this woman and meeting someone and really changing her life.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, mate. So Duncan and I, as no doubt you guys do as well, run into a lot of people in our travels and at the various conventions who are always fascinated with professionals like yourselves. You'll route into to your specific career, and how you've actually made those steps. So Ben, how did you come to be in the place that you are now?
Yeah, you know, for me, it's really interesting. Like, if you had told me, you know, as I was sort of growing up, that this job existed, I would have aimed for it all along. But the thing is, you know, it kind of didn't. So my initial foray was into film and television. I spent a lot of time and effort sort of working in that field. But all along, I was just this huge gamer. And you know, old school. So when those things kind of all collided for me at this moment, I think it was in 2006, 2007, where a friend of mine kind of hooked me up with a connection at Ubisoft. And that one thing kind of led to another, and I got a chance to work on one of the games in the Prince of Persia franchise. And my video game career kind of took off from there. And that's, you know, it really for me was about being a gamer. And that's one of the things that's also very exciting about this project, which is that, like, alongside being a gamer, as I grew up, I was a big comic book fan. So it's really nice to see the two come together.
Here, yeah, well said. Gilbert, how about you?
Well, for me, it was a long road as well. I'm an arts teacher by trade, but I never spent any time in front of a classroom because I went into graphic design and printed media. And then at some point when Killzone came out, the first one, I was taken back by the fact that it was built in Holland. So I was like, I need to work here. So that's when I started my gig at Guerrilla, and have been there from 2006. So
fantastic,
a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as well, right now working on a comic, I'm thrilled because it's been a focal point of, you know, of mine always to get to this place that I am right now. I've got, I mean, I'm not the artist. We got a great artist here, but at least I have my opinions that I can you know, sprinkle around. So.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. And Anne T, what about yourself?
Well, I have to say it all kind of started at San Diego Comic-Con. Little 14-year-old me, I would go and I would actually meet comic book writers and artists. And so it was the first time I tried to write anything other than a short story. I was like, oh, this is something you can actually do, and you make amazing comics out of it. So the first thing I ever tried to write was a Hellblazer comic, just so you know.
Fantastic.
And so it feels kind of, you know, circle of life kind of thing. It's very exciting to finally be working in comics. So like Ben said, I was a lifelong gamer. So when I was able to start working in games, it's a great experience. I love all the media. I am all about the popular arts. So I'm just thrilled to be working on a comic and a game and all the great stuff.
That is awesome. Actually, in a previous incarnation, I used to publish a bunch of Garth Ennis books with DC. So yeah, you can't choose a better book than Hellblazer, and his is probably the keynote sequence. So guys, we now reached that point where if you've actually ever been in a San Diego conference hall, you'll know that there's an invigilator who stands at the back saying 2 minutes to go. And we've just blown through that point. So my final parting question, given that we're talking about the marriage of Horizon Zero Dawn and comic books, and JB shared with us before his love of Akira, will be to ask everybody on the Guerrilla side, what have your favorite comic books of the last 15 or 20 years been? Just real quick. I'll start with you, Anne. T.
You might have to come back to me. I was thinking about this earlier, but I was like, oh wait, Sandman is older than that.
Well, that's all right. You don't have to be super observant about it. How about yourself, Gilbert?
For me right now, Southern Bastards. I'm hoping it returns soon. Isola, but also some of the. I'm not a superhero guy, so I'm more 100 Bullets, anything Vertigo.
Yeah.
Scalped.
Great book.
But also Gotham Central, you know, it's
Oh,
mostly
man.
crime and,
Yeah.
crime and yeah.
Well, Ed Brubaker is a genius. He's a fantastic writer.
Yeah.
He's amazing. How about
Yeah,
yourself,
of course.
Ben?
Yeah.
I mean, going to go a little old school. Definitely a huge fan of Alan Moore. Huge fan of Chris Claremont and the X-Men. That's where that's what I grew up on. And then more recently, Saga.
Fantastic, fantastic choice. How about yourself, JB? Anything on top of Akira?
Well, of course, maybe like Ben said, maybe Alan Moore, maybe old stuff there, maybe top 10. Maybe that's maybe one of my favorite ones, maybe from Alan Moore back in the day. But maybe everything he's done, maybe has been brilliant. More recently, Saga certainly maybe comes to mind, as well as Destiny, Manifest Destiny, maybe, which I really am enjoying at the moment.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of great stuff, maybe, like, you know, it really feels maybe like this is a great moment, maybe, to be in comic books and to enjoy comic books.
I couldn't agree more. And Em, do you have any favorite books you can think of that you'd like to share with us?
I like this particular manga, and it's actually inspired me to draw my own comics. The one is Otoyo Megatari by Kaoru Mori.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and then
great choice.
yeah, and then the second one is another webcomic. Its title is Silent Still. Stay silent. Well, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Stay silent.
Stand still, stay silent.
Stand still, stay silent. Awesome. I will check that one out.
Yeah.
That one I don't know. Fantastic. Thank you for the recommendation.
By Mina Sandberg.
Stand still, stay silent. I'm going to check that out after this session. So, guys, we've reached that point. Thank you, Anne. We've reached that point where we've got to the end of the panel. Like they said, Bob's Country Bunker, anybody who's watching this, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So everybody, thank you for joining us. And once again, Gilbert, Ben, Anne, Mr. Baizley, JB, thanks for all your time. We're super excited about this project, and we just love working with you guys and the work we do with you guys. Thanks, people of San Diego, people of virtual San Diego. Cheerio. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.